Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to our radio production this evening of The Princess and the Goblin. Just so you are aware, and you may be since you are here this evening, the library will be doing no in-person programming this calendar year. So you'll want to look out for more online programming such as this one tonight. We list our programs on our events page on the library website. We ask that you put away all distractions and any other devices that are nearby. You know what we mean. And take a step back in time to the days when families gathered around their radios to hear thrilling stories brought to life using only dialogue. Tonight will feature The Princess and the Goblin. Afterwards, we'll have the opportunity to meet the actors behind the show and ask questions about their experience of making radio theater. All right, everybody, settle in and enjoy the show.
Greetings from the Daniel Boone Regional Library and various homes around Columbia. This evening's performance is The Princess and the Goblin, a children's fantasy novel by George MacDonald. It was published in 1872, and this script has been adapted by Sarah Jost. Starring the voice talents of Nathan O'Neill, Dee Dee Ferris, Dana Bucky, Sarah Jost, Terry Yates, Eric Moore, and Mark Baumgartner, we now present to you The Princess and the Goblin.
There once was a little princess whose father was king over a great country full of mountains and valleys. His palace was built upon one of the mountains and was very grand and beautiful. The princess, whose name was Irene,
That's me!
The princess, whose name was Irene, was born there. But she was soon sent after her birth to be brought up by country people in a half castle, half farmhouse on the side of another mountain. These mountains were full of hollow places and winding ways. In these subterranean caverns lived a strange race of beings called
Goblins!
And this
Is how it begins.
one very wet day, when the mist was constantly gathering itself together in raindrops and pouring down on the roofs of the great old house, the princess could not, of course, go out. She got very bored and decided to explore.
I've never seen this stairwell before. It looks as if no one has ever set foot upon it. I wonder what's at the top.
Up and up she ran, such a long way it seemed to her, until she came to the top of the third flight. There she found the landing was the end of a long passage. It was full of doors on each side.
What is this place? Why is it so quiet?
She ran for some distance, turned several times, and very soon she was sure that she had lost her way back. Rooms everywhere, and no stairs. Nothing but passages and doors.
I will never run from Ludi again. Never, ever. I just want to go back to the nursery now.
Come now, child. Calm down. Stiff upper lip.
Yes, sir.
She did not cry long, however, for she was brave. She got up and brushed the dust from her frock. Then she wiped her eyes with her hands, for princesses don't always have their handkerchiefs in their pockets. Next, like a true princess, she resolved on going wisely to work to find her way back. She would walk through the passages and look in every direction for the stairs. At last, in a corner, through a half-open door, she did see a stair. But alas,
It goes the wrong way. Instead of going down, it goes up.
it was very narrow and so steep she went like a four-legged creature on her hands and feet. When she came to the top, she found herself in a square place with 3 doors. She stood for a moment without an idea in her little head what to do next.
Excuse me?
Sorry, that's how it's written.
Pish posh.
But as she stood, she began to hear a curious humming sound.
What is that? Could it be the rain? No, it's much gentler. What could it be?
She was rather afraid,
Was not.
but her curiosity was stronger than her fear, and she opened the door very gently and peeped in. What do you think she saw?
It's a very old lady sitting at a spinning wheel?
Perhaps you will wonder how the princess could tell that the old lady was an old lady, when I inform you that not only was she beautiful, but her skin was smooth and white. Her hair was combed back from her forehead and face and hung loose far down her back. Her eyes looked so wise that you could not have helped seeing she must be old.
She looks quite old indeed. Quite 50.
Come in, my dear, come in. I'm glad to see you. Why, what have you been doing with your eyes, child?
Crying.
Hadn't you a handkerchief to wipe your eyes with?
No.
Then why didn't you come to me to wipe them for you?
I didn't know you were here. I will next time.
There's a good child. Do you know my name, child?
No, I don't know it.
My name is Irene.
That's my name.
I know that. I let you have mine. I haven't got your name. You've got mine.
How can that be? I've always had my name.
Your papa, the king, asked if I had any objection to you having it, and of course I hadn't. I let you have it with pleasure.
It was very kind of you to give me your name, and such a pretty one.
Wouldn't you like to know who I am, child?
Yes, that I should, very much.
I'm your great-great-grandmother. I came here to take care of you.
You must be a queen too, if you're my great big grandmother.
Yes, I am a queen.
I wonder why Ludi never told me.
Your nurse doesn't know. She's never seen me.
But somebody knows you're in the house.
No, nobody. Shall I give a gift?
Oh yes, please, grandmother.
Irene's grandmother removed from her pocket a shimmering ball of thread, about the size of a pigeon's egg, and a delicate ring.
How pretty. What am I to do with it, please?
That I will now explain to you. Give me your hand. This ring goes with the thread.
What a beautiful ring. Am I to keep it?
Always.
Oh, thank you, grandmother. It's prettier than anything I ever saw. I will take such care of it.
Of course you will.
Irene stretched out her hand to take the ball of thread, but the lady turned and, going to her cabinet, opened a drawer and laid the ball in it.
Oh, grandmother, I thought you had spun it for me.
So I did, my child, and you've got it.
No, you've put it in the drawer.
No, my darling. That ball of thread is yours. I fastened the end of it to the ring on your finger.
I feel it, but I can't see it.
No, the thread is too fine for you to see it.
But what use can I make of it if it lies in your cabinet?
If ever you find yourself alone and in danger, all you need to do is follow the thread. It will lead you to safety.
Oh, how delightful.
You must not doubt the thread. Of one thing you may be sure, that while you hold it, I hold it too.
But won't the thread get in somebody's way and be broken? If the one end is fast to my ring and the other laid in your cabinet?
You will find that it arranges itself.
I wish I were as old as you, grandmother. You are so very clever to make such a thing, and I don't think you are ever afraid of anything.
Perhaps by the time I am 2,000 years of age, I shall indeed never be afraid of anything. But I confess I sometimes have been afraid for my children. Sometimes about you, Irene. It's getting late, my dear. I will take you back without anyone seeing you.
Why, where have you been, princess? It's very unkind of you to hide away so long. Where have you been?
I've been up a long way to see my great-great-grandmother.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that I have been to see my great-great-grandmother. Oh, Ludi, you don't know what a beautiful mother of grandmothers I've got upstairs.
What nonsense are you talking, princess?
I'm not talking nonsense. I'll tell you all about her. She's much taller than you and much prettier.
Oh, I dare say.
She sits in an empty room spinning all day long.
Not a doubt of it.
Ludi, why don't you believe me?
You are telling tales. Now come along, child. It's time for bed.
Yes, Ludi.
The next day, the great cloud still hung over the mountain, and the rain poured like water from a full sponge. But the mist was not such a dark, dingy gray. There was a light in it. And as the hours went, it grew brighter and brighter, until it was almost too brilliant to look at.
See? See, Ludi? The sun has had his face washed. Look how bright he is. Let's go out for a walk.
They set out together for a walk up the mountain. The road was hard and steep that the water could not rest upon it, and it was always dry enough for walking a few minutes after the rain ceased. And so their day passed joyfully.
The sun is getting low, Irene. It's time to be going back.
Please, just a little longer. Just around one more bend, and then we'll return home.
One more.
The nurse made the remark again and again, but every time the princess begged her to go just a little farther. So on and on they went. Suddenly, the shadow of a great mountain peak came up from behind and shot in front of them. When the nurse saw it, she started and shook, and catching hold of the princess's hand, turned and began to run down the hill.
What's all the haste, Ludi?
We must not be out a moment longer.
But we can't help but be out a good many moments longer.
It was too true. They were much too far from home. It was against express orders to be out with the princess one moment after the sun was down, and they were nearly a mile up the mountain. If His Majesty, Irene's papa, were to hear of it, Ludi would certainly be dismissed.
Ludi, why do you run so fast? It shakes my teeth when I talk.
Then don't talk.
But the princess went on talking.
Look, Ludi, don't you see that funny man peeping over the rock?
Ludi only ran the faster. They had to pass the rock, and when they came nearer, the princess saw...
It's only a lump of the rock, and I thought it was an old man. Oh, look, Ludi, there's such a curious creature at the foot of that old tree. Look at it, Ludi. It's making faces at us, I do think.
Ludi gave a stifled cry and ran faster still, so fast that Irene's little legs could not keep up with her, and she fell with a crash. It was a hard downhill road, and she had been running very fast, so it was no wonder she began to cry. This put the nurse nearly beside herself, but all she could do was run the moment she got the princess on her feet again.
Who is that laughing at me?
Nobody, child.
Lies, lies, lies.
We've taken a wrong turning somewhere, and I don't know where we are. We are lost.
The terror she was in had quite bewildered her. It was true enough that they had lost the way. They had been running down into a little valley in which there was no house to be seen. Now, Irene did not know what good reason there was for the nurse's terror, for the servants had all strict orders never to mention the goblins to her. Before she had time to grow thoroughly alarmed like her, she heard the sound of singing. Presently, she saw a boy coming up the road from the valley to meet them.
There's a spark inside us that we can all ignite.
Yeah!
There, that'll do for 'em. They can't bear singing, and they can't stand that song.
The boy was dressed in a miner's garb, with a cap on his head. He looked happy, merry indeed, perhaps at the thought of having routed the goblins, and his bearing as he stood before them had nothing clownish or rude about it.
I saw them as I came up, and I'm very lucky I did. I knew they were after somebody, but I couldn't see who it was. They won't touch you so long as I'm with you.
And why should the goblins mind you?
Because I don't mind them. I'm used to them.
What difference does that make?
If you're not afraid of them, they're afraid of you. And I'm not afraid of them. A song is all you need up here, but it's different down in the mines. The goblins won't always mind that song even down there. And if a miner gets frightened and misses a word or says a wrong one, the goblins, oh, don't they give it to him.
What do they do to him?
Don't go frightening the princess.
The princess? I beg your pardon. But you oughtn't be out so late. I hope they didn't hear you call her the princess. If they did, they're sure to know her again. They're awfully sharp.
Don't go on like that. We've lost our way.
Come along. I'll soon set you right again.
What's your name?
My name's Curdy, little princess.
What a funny name. Curdy. What more?
Curdy Peterson? What's your name, please?
Irene.
He should say, Your Royal Highness or My Royal Highness.
No, Ludi, I won't be called names. Curdy, my name's Irene. It's very kind of you to go out of your way to take us home.
I'm not going out of my way yet. It's on the other side of those rocks the path turns off to my father's.
You wouldn't think of leaving us to a safe home, I'm sure.
Of course not.
You dear, good, kind Curdy. I'll give you a kiss when we get home.
Princess mustn't give kisses. It's not at all proper.
Look, there are the lights of your great house down below.
Ludi, I promise to kiss.
He's only a very boy.
He's a good, brave boy, and he's been very kind to us. Ludi, I promised.
Your Royal Highness must come in directly.
Nurse, a princess must not break her word.
Never mind, Princess Irene. You mustn't kiss me tonight, but you shan't break your word. I will come another time. You may be sure I will. Good night, Irene. Good night, Ludi.
Curdy went home whistling. He saw no more goblins that night and was soon fast asleep in his bed. The next morning, as soon as they had had breakfast, he set off with his father for the mine. They entered the hill by a natural opening under a huge rock, where a little stream rushed out. With flint and steel and tinderbox, they lit their lamps, then fixed them on their heads, and were soon hard at work with their pickaxes and shovels and hammers. When he began to feel rather hungry, he dropped his pickaxe, got out a lump of bread, and sat down to eat his supper. Then he leaned back for 5 minutes' rest before beginning his work again, and laid his head against the rock. He had not kept the position for 1 minute before he had heard something which made his ears sharpen. It sounded like a voice inside the rock.
If it wasn't for our feet, we would have defeated the Sun People already.
That is your weak point. I confess, my boy.
And it's yours too, Father.
It's a goblin weakness. Why they come so soft, I declare, I haven't any idea.
Especially when your head's so hard, Father.
The goblin's glory is in his head. To think how the humans on the surface have to wear helmets and things when they go fighting. Pathetic Sun People. What a mess these humans will soon find themselves in.
What do you mean?
It's time you took a bride, and you will have no one else but the human princess.
The Goblin King dropped his voice so low that Curdy could hear only a growl, but he had learned something of great importance. One weak point of a goblin's body, their feet.
It would be nice to make a human princess cry.
When you marry her, you can do whatever you like, my darling.
What? Do they mean Princess Irene?
Anxious to hear everything they might say, Curdy slid down a smooth part of the rock just under him to the ledge below. But whether he was not careful enough or the ledge gave way, down he came with a rush on the floor of the cavern, bringing with him a great rumbling shower of stones.
An intruder in the palace! What right do you have to be here?
The right of necessity, Your Majesty. I lost my way and did not know where I was wandering to.
How did you get in?
I fell?
You will oblige me by walking out of my palace at once.
With pleasure, if Your Majesty will give me a guide.
We will give you 1,000.
In rushed goblins till the cave was swarming. They began gathering around Curdy in a way he did not relish, and he retreated towards the wall. They pressed upon him and out shot 100 long arms with a multitude of thick-nailed fingers at the ends of them to lay hold upon him. Curdy made a sudden rush at the king and stomped with all his might on his majesty's feet. The king gave a mighty howl and almost fell into the fire. Suddenly, The queen herself caught him up in her arms and dashed him into a hole in the wall with a force that stunned him. When he came to himself, there as was perfect silence about him, the utter darkness, but for the merest glimmering in one tiny spot. He crawled to it and found that they had heaved a slab against the mouth of the hole. Though he tried, Curdy could not move it. He was at last compelled to acknowledge himself in an evil plight.
How long will it take?
Not many days, I should think. Humans are poor, feeble creatures. I judge a week of starvation will do for him.
I ought to have some voice in the matter since I captured him. It seems a pity to waste so much fresh meat.
What are you thinking of, my love?
Our little dogs and cats and pigs and small bears would enjoy him very much.
Let it be so. Bring the guards in, and let's kill the human at once. He deserves it.
I won't let you kill me so easily. There's a power in every breath. There's a power in every note.
What's that horrible noise?
It's the sun creature in the hole.
Oh, stop this disgusting noise. I'll break your head.
Do your worst.
I cannot bear it.
He'll tire himself out. Let's leave him be with his wretched songs.
Come along then. He can sing himself to death.
One splendid sunshiny day, Irene heard the distant blast of a bugle. She knew by the particular blast that it was her father, that her father was close. I wish to describe the king so that you could see him in your mind. He had gentle blue eyes, but a nose that made him look like an eagle, a long dark beard streaked with silvery lines. After he had held Irene to his heart for a moment, he took her hand and walked with her into the great hall.
How have you been, my child?
I'd like you to take me to see my great old grandmother.
What does my little daughter mean?
I mean Queen Irene that lives up in the tower. The very old lady, you know, with long hair of silver. You know she's there, don't you?
No, I'm afraid I didn't.
You won't come up and see my great beautiful grandmother then, Papa?
Not this time. She has not invited me, you know, and great old ladies like her do not appreciate uninvited guests.
I suppose you're right.
You were out late one evening, Irene.
Yes, Papa. It was my fault, and Ludi was very sorry. She's been so afraid of being late ever since. It was only a mistake for once.
Once might be too often.
When in the evening he rode away, he left 6 of his attendants behind him, with orders that 3 of them should watch outside the house every night from sunset to sunrise. And for the princess, nothing more happened worth telling for some time until one morning the princess woke in a terrible fright. There was a hideous noise in her room, creatures snarling and hissing and rocketing about as if they were fighting. The moment she came to herself, she remembered what her grandmother told her to do when she was frightened.
Follow the thread.
The thought gave her such courage that she stopped to put on her dainty little slippers and a cloak before running from the room. Feeling her grandmother's thread, she proceeded at once to follow it, expecting it would lead her straight up the old stair. Then, to her surprise, and somewhat to her dismay, she found that instead of leading her towards the stairs, it turned in quite the opposite direction. It led her straight up the mountain. When she found that the thread was actually taking her into the hole out of which a stream ran, she did not hesitate. Farther and farther into the darkness of the great hollow mountain she went. Through one narrow passage after another, the thread guided her until she came to a dead end.
What am I to do now? The thread leads nowhere.
For a terrible moment, she felt as if her grandmother had forsaken her. No matter how many times she pulled at the thread, it only led through the slab of stone in front of her. All at once it came into her head that she might remove some of the smaller stones and see where the thread went next. With an aching back and bleeding fingers and hands, she worked on, sustained by the pleasure of seeing the heap slowly diminish. She had got about halfway down when she started. Somewhere close by, a voice was softly singing.
There's a spark inside us that we can all ignite.
That's Curdy's song. Curdy, are you here?
Princess Irene? Hush, please speak softly.
But why?
Because the goblins know I am here and they don't know you are. How did you get here?
My great-great-grandmother sent me, and at first I didn't know why. But I think I know now. You can't get out, I suppose.
No, I can't. What are you doing?
Clearing away a huge heap of stones.
That's excellent. I can't think how you got here, though.
I told my grandmother sent me after her thread.
I don't know what you mean, but it doesn't much matter.
Oh, yes, it does. I should have never been here but for her.
How far in have you gotten? Do you see slabs laid up against the wall?
Yes.
I think when you've cleared the slab about halfway down, I shall be able to push it over. Let me know when you are ready and stand quite clear of it.
Now, Curdy.
Curdy gave a great rush with his shoulder against it. Out tumbled the slab on the heap, and out crept Curdy over the top of it.
You saved my life, Irene.
Oh, Curdy, I'm so glad. Let's get out of this horrid place as fast as we can.
That's easier said than done.
Oh, no, it's quite easy. We have only to follow my thread. I'm sure it's going to take us out now.
Where are you going there? That's not the way out. That's where I couldn't get out.
This is the way my thread goes.
So he crept over the slab once more into the hole. But when he looked about in it, he could see her nowhere. Now he discovered that although the hole was narrow, it was much longer than he had supposed, and it went off into a small passage that he hadn't seen before. He got on his hands and knees and crept after her. Everywhere it was narrow, far too narrow for a goblin to get through, and so I presume the goblins never thought that Curdy might. And when he turned the next corner, there Irene stood waiting for him.
Now you must keep by me. I don't want you to get lost again.
He followed her a few steps and came out into another great cavern. Across with Irene walked in a straight line, as confidently as if she knew every step of the way. Curdy went on after her, trying to see something of what lay around them. Suddenly, he started back a pace as the light fell upon something close by which Irene was passing. It was a platform of rock raised a few feet from the floor, covered with sheepskins, upon which lay two horrible figures asleep, at once recognized by Curdy as the king and queen of the goblins.
Stop one moment.
Why?
This is the king and queen of the goblins. We could defeat them now while they're sleeping.
We can't, Curdy. I want to leave.
Suddenly, the queen gave a great growl and sat up in bed. The same instant, the king awoke also and sat up beside her.
Run, Irene!
Here, Curdy, take my hand.
They heard the queen give a great bellow, but they had a good start, for it would be some time before they could get torches lit to the purpose then. Just as they thought, they saw a gleam behind them. The thread brought them to a very narrow opening, through which Irene crept easily, and Curdy with some difficulty.
I think we're safe now.
Of course we are.
Why do you think so?
Because my grandmother's taking care of us.
That's all nonsense. I don't know what you mean.
If you don't know what I mean, what right do you have to call it nonsense?
I beg your pardon, Irene. I did not mean to vex you. How did you find your way to me?
I have told you so 10 times already. By following the thread. I have it here. You feel it yourself, don't you?
I can make nothing of it.
Well, I can, and you must be glad of it, for it will do us both good.
We're not out yet.
We soon shall be.
At length they spied a glimmer of light, and in a minute more they were almost blinded by full sunlight, into which they emerged. It was soon little time before the princess could see well enough to discover they stood in her own garden.
Now, Curdy, won't you believe me when I tell you about my grandmother and her thread? Don't you see it shining on before us now?
I don't see anything.
Then you must believe without seeing, for you can't deny it has brought us out of the mountain. Well, come along, and Ludi will get you something to eat.
I want to, but I shouldn't. My father and mother will be so anxious to see me.
Very well, Curdy. But you can't get out without coming this way, and I'll take you through the house, for that is nearest.
They met no one by the way, for indeed, as before, the people were here and there and everywhere searching for the princess. Irene found that the thread, as she half expected, went up the old staircase, and a new thought struck her.
My grandmother wants me. Do come up with me and see her. Then you will know that I've been telling you the truth.
Lead the way, princess.
Come in, my dear. I've been waiting for you, and indeed getting a little anxious about you, and beginning to think whether I should go fetch you myself.
I've brought Curdy, grandmother. He wouldn't believe what I told him, so I've brought him.
He is a good boy, Curdy, and a brave boy. Aren't you glad you rescued him?
Yes, grandmother. But it wasn't very good of him not to believe me when I was telling him the truth.
People must believe what they can, and those who believe more must not be hard upon those who believe less.
I'm sure you're right. But he'll believe now, won't you, Curdy?
I don't see any grandmother. You're making a game of me. Your Royal Highness, and after what we have come through together, I don't think it is kind of you.
Then what do you see?
I see a big, bare room.
And what more do you see?
I see a tub and a heap of musty straw and a withered apple and a ray of sunlight coming through the hole in the middle of the roof and shining on your head. I think you'd better drop it, princess, and find Ludi.
You don't believe me, Curdy?
No, I can't, and I can't help it.
You must give him time, Irene, and you must be content not to be believed for a while. It is very hard to bear, but I have had to bear it, and shall have to bear it many a time yet. You must let him go now.
You're not coming with me, are you?
No, Curdy. My grandmother says I must let you go.
I wish I had gone home at once. I'm very obliged to you, Irene, for getting me out of that hole, but I wish you hadn't made a fool of me afterwards. I'm leaving now. Goodbye, princess.
What does it all mean, grandmother?
You must be content, I say, to be misunderstood for a while. We are all very anxious to be understood, and it is very hard not to be. But there is one thing much more necessary.
What is that, grandmother?
To understand other people.
Yes, grandmother. To be fair, for if I'm not fair to other people, I'm not worth being understood myself. So as Curdy can't help it, I will not be vexed with him.
You are very tired, my child. Your hands are hurt with stones, and I have counted 9 bruises on you.
I imagine I'm quite a mess, grandmother.
I'm going to put you in bed for a good sleep.
But what will Ludi be thinking? And what am I to say to her when she asks me where I've been?
Don't trouble yourself about it. You will find it all come right. Good night, my love.
Curdy returned home neither whistling nor singing. He was vexed with Irene, and he was vexed with himself for having spoken to her so angrily. His mother gave a cry of joy when she saw him, and at once set about getting him something to eat, asking him questions all the time.
Now, Curdy, tell us the whole story from beginning to end, just as it happened.
Princess spoke such nonsense and told me a pack of things that weren't a bit true, and I can't get over it. I cannot understand how a child knowing nothing about the mountain, or even that I was trapped there, should come all that way alone, straight to where I was, and manage to leave both of us out again.
Then you have no right to say what she told you was not true. She did take you out, and she must have had something to guide her. Why not a thread as well as a rope or anything else? There is something you cannot explain, and her explanation may be the right one.
It's no explanation at all, Mother, and I can't believe it.
That may be only because you do not understand it. I don't blame you for not being able to believe it, but I do blame you for fancying such a child would try to deceive you. Until you found a better way of accounting for it all, you might at least have been a bit more sparing of your judgment.
I regret how I acted with her.
You ought to go and tell her so then.
I may have a chance before long. I think, Father, Mother, the goblins are up to something terrible, and I have discovered it.
Have you indeed, my boy?
The goblins are digging towards the king's home. When I came upon the royal family in the caves, they were talking of their prince, Froglips, marrying a princess.
Oh, that is very serious.
They shan't have her, at least if I can help it.
The next night, Curdie went down the mountain to the king's house. He climbed over the wall and remained in the garden the whole night, creeping on hands and knees from one spot to the other, and lying at full length with his ear on the ground listening. But he had heard nothing except the tread of the men-at-arms as they marched about. Just as he came into the moonlight on the lawn, a whiz in his ear and a blow upon his leg startled him. He heard the sound of running feet and jumped up to escape. He fell, however, with a keen shoot of pain, for the bolt of a crossbow had wounded his leg. Instantly, the hands of the guards were upon him.
It's a boy.
I thought it was one of those demons. What are you doing here, boy? You have no business here in the king's grounds, and if you don't give a true account of yourself, you shall be considered a thief.
Let me go if you please.
But we don't, please. Not unless you give a good account of yourself.
I don't feel quite sure whether I can trust you.
We are the king's own men-at-arms.
Well, I will tell you all about it, if you will promise to listen to me and not do anything rash.
But Curdie could tell them no more, for he had fallen senseless to the grass in a dead faint. This is when the guards first discovered the bolt they had shot, taken him for one of the goblin creatures, had actually wounded him. They carried him into the house, tended to his wound, and left him locked in a disused room. In the morning, they found Curdie feverish and talking wildly. He told the soldiers all he knew about the goblins, but they concluded that he was only raving. That same night, there was a great rolling rumble beneath the king's mountain home, and the whole place quivered. All the servants started up in a fright and rushed to find the captain of the guard, who said that from their description that it must have been an earthquake, and then went back to bed again. Little did they know it was actually the goblins who had disrupted the very foundation of the house with their digging to break into the cellars. Each goblin was eager for the glory of stealing Princess Irene away that very night.
Curdie, you must wake up now.
What? Who are you?
I think you already know. I have healed your wound and unlocked the door. You must help the occupants of this house.
What? Me? You are her grandmother then. I didn't believe her. I didn't think you were real.
Curdie, you must help them. They need you.
She disappeared.
Suddenly, he heard the clashing and clanging of weapons, the voices of men and the cries of women mixed with the hideous bellowing which sounded victorious. The goblins were in the house. He sprang from his bed and hurried from the room. When he reached the ground floor, he found the whole place swarming. All the goblins of the mountain seemed gathered there.
Stamp on their feet. You must stamp their feet.
The guards rallied under Curdie's direction, and in a few minutes the hall was nearly empty, the goblins running from it as fast as they could, howling and shrinking and limping, and cowering every now and then as they ran to cuddle their wounded feet in their hard hands, or to protect them from the frightful stamp of the armed men.
Where's the princess? Please, do you know where the princess is?
No one knew, and off they all rushed in search of her. He entered her room and found it destroyed. It was only too evident that the goblins had been there, and Curdie had no longer any doubt that she had been carried off. He was determined to find and rescue the princess, as she had found and rescued him. He was turning away from the cellar to follow the goblins into their hole when something touched his hand. When he looked, he could see nothing, but his finger came upon a tight thread. It flashed upon him that this must be the princess's thread. Without saying a word, for he knew no one would believe him any more than he had believed the princess, he followed the thread. He found that the thread led straight up the mountain to his own home. Could the princess be there? He entered the cottage, and there sat his mother by the fire, with the princess.
Oh, Curdy, you've come. I thought you would.
Irene? I'm very sorry I did not believe you.
Oh, never mind. You do believe me now, don't you?
Yes, but I should have done so earlier. Just as I was going into the mountain to look for you, I got a hold of your thread, and it brought me here.
My grandmother brought me here as well. Goblins woke me, screaming and yelling and pulling at me. I felt for the thread, and there it was. And I remembered your song, and I did my best not to be afraid. The thread brought me onto the mountain. I supposed you were in trouble again, and I had to get you out, but it brought me here instead.
What of the goblins?
I don't know. When I began to sing, they faltered, and I managed to escape.
They wanted to carry you off into the mountain with them, for a wife to their Prince Froglips.
Ugh, how dreadful.
But you needn't be afraid, you know. Your grandmother takes care of you. Come here, Curdy. There's blood on your trousers. You are wounded.
Am I, Mother? Oh. Yes, I suppose I ought to be. Oh, but it's gone now. Only a scar.
My grandmother has been to see you. Don't you smell the roses? It was my grandmother healed your leg and sent you to me.
We must take the princess home at once, Curdy. Her father will be worried sick.
When Curdy entered the gate into the court, there sat the king on his horse, his face as white as a dead man's, and he looked as if the life had gone out of him. The men-at-arms he had brought with him sat with horror-stricken faces, but eyes flashing with rage, waiting only for the word of the king to do something. They did not know what, and nobody knew what.
Papa, Papa, here I am.
Irene? Oh, my child, you're safe.
The king bent down and took her from his arms. Big tears went dropping down his cheeks and his beard. The king did not set her down until she told them all the story.
Peter, Ellen, I wish to take your son with me. For his courage and determination, he shall enter my bodyguard at once and await further promotion.
Please, your majesty, I cannot leave my father and mother.
That's right, Curdy. I wouldn't if I was you.
But Curdy, why shouldn't you go with the king? We can get on very well without you.
But I can't get on very well without you. The king is very kind, and I could not be half the use to him that I am to you.
I too think you are right, Curdy. I will not ask you to leave your family again, but I shall not forget this debt, and I will repay it in full.
And now, Papa, I must tell you another thing. One night long ago, Curdy drove the goblins away and brought Ludi and me safe from the mountain. And I promised him a kiss when we got home, but Ludi wouldn't let me give it to him. I don't want you to scold Ludi, but I want you to tell her that a princess must do as she promises.
A princess must indeed keep her promises. Bestow your kiss.
The princess threw her arms around Curdy's neck and kissed him soundly on the cheek.
There, Curdy. There's the kiss I promised you.
Now that the king truly knew the danger of the goblins, soldiers were called in from the capital to manage the threat. The goblin royal family was killed. A good many of the goblins with their creatures escaped from the mountain, their courage dying with the royal family, and most of them soon left that part of the country. Of those who remained grew milder in character. Their skulls became softer as well as their hearts, and by degrees they became friendly with the inhabitants of the mountain, and even with the miners. It was a happier ending than any could have asked for. And the rest of the history of the princess and Curdy must be kept for another volume.
This has been a live performance of The Princess and the Goblin, starring the voice talents of Nathan O'Neill, Dee Dee Ferris, Dana Bucky, Sarah Jost, Terry Yates, Eric Moore, and Mark Baumgartner. This is a production of the Daniel Boone Regional Library.
Well, thank you guys for putting on such a great show. That was really, really enjoyable. And that's the second time I've heard that. So I just love hearing all your talents. To our attendees, did anybody have any questions for our cast? I believe they're going to turn on their cameras here in a moment so you can see them. And maybe we could each have them go around and tell us who they portrayed in this radio program.
Yeah, I'll start. My name is Dana. I did the grandmother, I did the Goblin Queen, and then I did Ellen, Curdy's mother.
I'm Nathan O'Neill. I was the narrator.
My name's Dee Dee Ferris, and I was Princess Irene.
My name's Mark Baumgartner. I was the Goblin King, guard number 1, and Peter Peterson, Curdy's father.
I'm Terry Yates. I did Ludi, Prince Froglips, and guard number 2.
I'm Eric. I did the Goblin and the King.
My name is Sarah Jost, and I was Curdy.
So we have a question from one of our audience members. Was this adapted for Reader's Theater? And that would be Sarah, I believe, was our adapter for this. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yes, this was like a 98-page, like, I don't know if that's like a small novel at that point or like a big short story. I don't really know, but I turned it into however many pages this is so that we could read it for you guys.
Is it hard to just pull out the words that you want to say, but still keep the kind of the description in there to help people envision what the setting and everything?
I didn't think so, but I feel like all my adaptations end up very narrator heavy because I really like the little details. Most of what the characters say are straight from the book. Like I didn't adapt that too much.
Okay. So when, as you guys are reading this, it kind of made me think of when they're recording the voices for like a Disney film. And sometimes you see those actors kind of acting out the scene in their little booth. Do you guys ever kind of do that when you're sitting at your table?
Yeah.
That's the fun part.
The problem is when you don't have it memorized, if you get too animated, you may lose your spot in the script. And so it's a fine balance between acting it out and making sure you're staying in the right spot.
Yes, I have to have my paper right here. Like I have it right here and I'm emoting and talking, but I keep that paper very present because if I'm looking down and looking up, it's easy to get lost.
So looking at you guys, I don't see anybody who looks like a goblin or a little princess, but if one thing that I was thinking, one thing that I thought about for this show was the fact that if this was a live theater production where you were on stage, who would you be cast as, do you think? Would it be the same character or would it be one of the other characters in the show?
I mean, I think I would make an excellent Goblin Queen. All right.
Yeah.
Like, I think I could do that.
And I will accept nothing but the Goblin King.
I really like the grandmother character. I could really hear her voice. I think if I were on stage with this one, I bet I'd end up playing the grandmother. Just because I'm older than Sarah.
I think I could have grown my beard out for the King character, pulled it off.
Well, we had another question. How much did you all rehearse?
One time.
One time.
We rehearsed once just to make sure everyone had a good idea of what was going on. But that's one of the great things about Reader's Theater and not having to be memorized is you can run it once or twice and have a pretty good idea of what you're doing and that it'll be all right. And I mean, I don't cast amateurs. I cast only professionals. So I know they can handle it.
Do you get stage fright still?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I'm fine, but then like it was a minute before I think your final announcement is like, okay, I'm gonna start making it live and open it up, and my heart started like, what is going on? I'm sitting at home in my house. Why am I getting nervous? But yeah, I still do.
I find it much more comfortable in my house, especially when I know that people aren't looking at me. When we turn off our video, to me, that's very comforting to just have it be my voice. I only get nervous when I flub up, which, you know, we all do time and again. But when I flub up, I'm like, that's when I get a little tinge in my belly, like, oh no.
Well, you didn't notice I was sitting here like this watching you the whole time.
Always.
Well, one of our panelists says this is a great way to do live theater right now. And I have to agree. It's really nice to be able to see you guys because you're all pretty much regular on the stage in the Columbia area in one way or another. So if the attendees are here, where are different spots that we can see you guys when we can get back together in person? I know Maplewood Barn Theater is one.
Yep. And I mean, there's other online stuff that's going on too. Like Talking Horse is doing right now. They're hosting Guerrilla Theater, so they've got a play that's getting ready to open up this coming weekend, Pygmalion, which is the play that My Fair Lady was based on, and you can see Sarah in that, and I'm directing it, so I'm kind of sort of there. And then Talking Horse is also getting ready to do Starting Gate, which will also be filmed, but it'll all be online too. So anybody else got anything going on?
CEC is just getting ready to audition for Grounded, which will be a limited in-person event, but also recorded, I believe, so people can buy tickets for that.
And Disenchanted.
Yes, also Disenchanted. And they're doing that one as well. I don't know as much about that one.
It's a musical and it's so fun. And it's like all of the Disney princesses kind of after their happily ever after, when they realize they're not so happy. So maybe not for young children. There is some language and some sexual innuendos. But for like your older Disney kids, I'd say like 13 plus at least, it's so much fun.
Where was Disenchanted? That was
CEC, and that'll go up at the end of October, I think.
all right. Well, I think that's all of the questions we have. Thank you to our attendees for coming. Thank you to our delightful voice actors. You guys were fantastic as usual. I hope everybody had a really good time, and we hope to see you again at some of more of the Zoom programs here at the library. Thank you, guys.